We're fearlessly talking about the biggest stories that matter to you the most. Breaking news, John Calipari is finalizing a 5-year deal to become the Arkansas Razorbacks' next head coach, covering college sports like no one else. The biggest guests in sports. We now welcome in Hall of Famer Jim Calhoun.
Such a pride I had, I came to connect.
The legend, Tim Tebow, joins us.
We'll run it back. I like it.
The legend, Herschel Walker. Welcome in, everybody. Sunday morning edition of the Aaron Torres Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Aaron Torres. Hope everybody's doing well. Hope everybody's having a great day. By the way, your boy Torres was on Fox Sports Radio last night till 2 a.m. Eastern talking Luka, as well as all the craziness in college hoops. So, Torres is going on like 2 hours sleep here, but it is a loaded Sunday show. And we got, oh my goodness, do we have a lot to react to. So we are obviously going to open, where we are going to start. Rupp Arena, John Calipari's return. Nobody, including Torres, I got to take the L, gave John Calipari much of a chance. Arkansas 89-79. And what I think was just frankly one of the most stunning results that we have seen in college hoops in a long time, given the circumstances, given the venue, given everything. We'll break that down. We'll start with Cal. By the way, we will have a conversation about Mark Pope. I think this is the first time there's some genuine frustration. This was a game you had to win. Mark Pope said at his opening press conference he understood the assignment. Well, I didn't get a very good grade on this assignment, so we'll discuss that game from all angles. Then we'll just get into just a crazy day of college hoops outside of Arkansas, Kentucky. Do want to talk Duke-UNC. Listen, Duke deserves credit, but UNC, this is embarrassing at this point. We're not going to do another Hubert Davis should be fired rant, but I think there's some serious conversations about where this team, organization, program is in college basketball circles. And also we'll talk UConn, unbelievable win at Marquette. We'll talk about not only Danny Hurley, but Bobby Hurley with a wild post-game tirade and just an insane Saturday of college hoops. I said it on the last show we did Thursday afternoon. So much credit to the powers that be. This was the first weekend without football, unless you include the Pro Bowl games, which none of us do. And boy, oh boy, did it deliver. Before we get started, a couple quick reminders. One, make sure you're subscribed to Aaron Torres Pod YouTube channel. New clips, new videos going up every single day. I keep saying it, but people, we are closing in on 50,000 subscribers. We need to get to 50K here soon. We need your support. We really do appreciate your support, but we need it. So make sure you're subscribed on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, etc. Also, make sure you are following on social media. I mentioned it before. If you're a small business owner, big business owner, whatever, we are looking for some advertisers for March Madness. It is about to be bananas. The numbers are going to be insane. So make sure to reach out to me, Aaron Torres, podcastquestions@gmail.com with any thoughts. By the way, you can drop your thoughts in the chat today. We will get to plenty of questions. I don't know how long this show could go 4 hours the way I'm thinking here. We will prioritize super chats. So if we get any super chats, we'll go ahead and get to those first. Also, make sure you're subscribed on Apple, Spotify, etc. Also, before we get started, you know who we got to thank. We got to thank our friends. We got to thank our partners. We got to thank Collie Puffs and ColliePuffs.com. Okay, so first of all, so many of you have told me that you've actually purchased Collie Puffs. I appreciate your support of the show. I know Collie Puffs does as well. But for those who are not familiar, haven't heard of it, listen, this is a great story. First of all, it's that time of year. It's now February, so maybe those New Year's resolutions are a little bit out the door. But the bottom line is pretty straightforward, right? You're trying to eat healthier, you're trying to be healthier, you're trying to drink less, you're trying to eat better, all that good stuff. Well, that's where Collie Puffs comes in. These are the healthy alternative to the crap in your grocery aisle. Baked, not fried, avocado oil, no grease. But the best part is they taste delicious. I've told the story before, but family-owned company. Joey is the founder of Collie Puffs. He's a guy who was sitting on the couch one day watching football. He's a Rams season ticket holder, and he said, I need to start eating healthier. I need something delicious for me, but I need something delicious that my kids are going to love as well. And my friends, that's where Collie Puffs comes in. So at this point, many of you have tried them. We appreciate every single person who has helped support Collie Puffs in this show. But if you have not, you can go ahead and do it at ColliePuffs.com. That's CAULIPUFFS.com. Also, you can go ahead and find them on Amazon. So you're on Amazon, you're searching for whatever you're searching for, put it in your cart, just search Cauli Puffs, throw them in your cart, tell them Torres sent you. We do appreciate your support. With that said, it is a busy, oh my goodness, busy Sunday morning. There is no more time to waste. So let's get to the topic of the day. Topic of the day, listen, in the grand scheme of sports, it's probably Luka Doncic. You know, I spent 3 hours talking about that on Fox Sports Radio. If you want to go back and listen to the pod there. But right now, I mean, my only takeaway, by the way, is I don't know what the Mavs are doing. I just don't know how you trade a superstar in his prime. Don't really get it. There's some Lakers conspiracy theories out there. We'll save that for maybe the after show, the bonus show of the Aaron Torres pod. But right now, the only topic of the day, the only topic that anybody wants to talk about is what happened at Rupp Arena Saturday night. You know, we knew the stakes coming in. We knew that Arkansas was coming in, John Calipari's return. I thought John Neighbors on our show last week articulated it well. It wasn't even really Arkansas versus Kentucky. It was Cal versus Kentucky. And nobody, including me, by the way, gave Arkansas very much of a chance. Listen, I thought there was a scenario they could keep it close. I did not see them going into Rupp Arena and getting the win. Only that's exactly what happened. Final score at Rupp Arena. Arkansas gets the victory 89-79. And listen, we're not going to spend too much time doing this, but I said it on Twitter and I'll say it here. People, can anybody stop the big pig invasion? At least for one night, the answer was no. So let's go ahead and dive into this. And listen, to me, crazy game, crazy start, crazy atmosphere. First of all, I know it's a little bit of a down morning in Kentucky. Some of our loyal Kentucky listeners don't even seem to be in the chat today. But listen, you guys brought it. You guys delivered. Debate all week. Should they boo? Should they not boo? I didn't care. I'm not here to lecture anybody. But one thing I did know was that atmosphere was going to be crazy. It was going to be insane. I know a lot of people that have, been season ticket holders, are regulars at Rupp Arena, said that was the best atmosphere they have ever seen at Rupp Arena. And so it speaks to the excitement. It speaks to, just how ready people were to go for this game. But let's take it a step further. It speaks to how big this game was. By the way, big whiff from College Game Day, but that's another conversation for another day. And the great part was the play on the court largely matched the enthusiasm in the arena. Listen, I'm not surprised that Arkansas got out to a hot start. Arkansas actually throughout the season has mostly, for the most part, played very well early in games. And so, listen, if I had a best bet, we didn't do best bets, and we're not doing them right now, at least at this time on the calendar, I probably admittedly would have said take Arkansas in the first half because they are a fast starting team. I thought they would have the momentum, have the energy. I actually thought they were weirdly suited maybe for the atmosphere a little bit better than the Kentucky players were, solely because 3 of those players on Arkansas played at Rupp Arena, knew how much it meant to John Calipari. So I wasn't surprised that they got off to the hot start, okay? Arkansas, obviously, look, shooting better than I anticipated. They're up 46-45 at the half. And again, I'm not surprised that they got off to the hot start. But even at halftime, I was like, okay, there's really 2 questions. One, they can't possibly keep shooting the way that they have because they haven't shot that way all year. And then 2, I just worried about the thing that we worry about with Arkansas all the time, which is they only have basically 8 playable players. I won't say 8 scholarship players because Arkansas fans get mad. There are players that are on scholarship but aren't getting any NIL. But at the same time, you basically have 8 playable players. And I said you just put up 46 points in the first half. You had all the energy, all the enthusiasm. But could you sustain it for 40 minutes? And I questioned if they could. I really, if at halftime, if you had asked me, I said I think Kentucky's going to be able to hold on to this game. It is worth noting, by the way, that Kentucky is down several players as well. We'll get to that. But from the Arkansas side, I just said, can they maintain this for 40 minutes? Well, not only did they maintain it, you could argue they played maybe better in the second half. The second half, Arkansas really was in control for most of the game. Kentucky made a few runs, but they just could not get closer. Arkansas outscores them by 9 after the break, and Arkansas gets the victory. I think the big takeaway, listen, to me, the obvious takeaway, the 3 guys that are the former Kentucky Wildcats, they showed up ready to play for their coach on Saturday night at Rupp Arena, okay? Listen, you could argue that given the circumstances, given the game, that was maybe the best game that DJ Wagner ever played at Rupp Arena. Certainly maybe the best game that Adu Thiero ever played at Rupp Arena. Big Z had that great first game. But man, oh man, all three came to play. Adu Thiero, 21 points, 8 boards, 3 steals, couple monster plays. Big Z, 14 points, 4 of 7 from 3. And DJ Wagner, 17 points and 8 assists. Let me say this before we even get to the Calipari part of things. I was actually happier. Listen, I was a little happy for Cal. If that makes me awful and terrible, we can have that conversation. But I was actually, I think, a little bit happier for DJ Wagner than maybe even Cal. DJ Wagner went through a lot of crap last year, man. And listen, I think some of it was justified. Rob Dillingham was great. Reed Shepherd, who might be persona non grata in Lexington going forward, they were incredible, okay? But I still say the best version of Kentucky last year was when DJ Wagner was fully healthy and he was at the point. It let Rob come off the bench. It let Reed be a star on and off the ball. And so I always felt like I just felt bad for the rap, if you will, that he got. And so I'm not going to lie. I always thought he was better. We've had him on this show because I believe in him. I believe in his potential. 17 points, 8 assists in this game. And again, I thought everybody played well, frankly, from the Arkansas side of things. Best game of Nelly Davis's time at Arkansas, 18 points, 3 of 6 from 3. Carter Knox, man, you talk about a kid that the world is his oyster in terms of potential. 10 points, 2 threes. If he could keep this going, it's going to be insane. I thought, TB Trevin Brazil gave great energy as he always does, and Arkansas gets the win. So look, the story to me from the on-the-court stuff, the 3 former Wildcats doing what they do. But let's talk about the Coach Cal perspective for a minute, because to me, what this game really showed was, in my opinion, there are 2 things about Coach Cal and really 2 things about Arkansas. And really, when it comes to Coach Cal, I think 2 things really struck me in terms of this game and this win. Okay. So there are 2 thoughts with Coach Cal. Let me dive into them, and then we'll get to Arkansas big picture. Okay. The first one with Coach Cal is this proves, again, as we learned time and time again at Kentucky and time again at Memphis, you can never really count out his teams. And it's not going well. I'm still not projecting Arkansas to make the tournament. I'm not going to sit on this show and say they're going to, they're whatever, 14-8 or whatever. Or 13-8. I'm not going to predict them to go 10-0 over the next 10 games. That's not what I'm about to do. But what I will say, this proves that you really can never count on his teams for 2 reasons. One, love him or hate him, he's always going to have the dudes that can play at the highest level with just about anybody. Now, are they better than Auburn? No. Are they better than Alabama? No. But pretty much anybody else in the SEC, they're going to have the talent to play with and maybe beat on any given night. And listen, I understand there's always going to be the argument about X's and O's and how good is he really. Here's the bottom line. You still need players. I don't care how great you are as an X's and O's coach. There's a lot of great X's and O's coaches that are assistant coaches now because they could never get it done on the recruiting trail. And so I'm never going to criticize him for bringing in talent. I think you can argue, is it too focused on just accumulating talent and not enough on a team? Okay, that's a different conversation. But he's always going to have the dudes that are good enough on pretty much any given night to go ahead and get the win. Beyond that, and I think this is the important part, I think we saw, once again, one of Calipari's greatest strengths, which I think became a frustration in his final years at Kentucky. His guys are loyal to him, and they're always going to play their butts off for him, okay? And so I think, listen, there are a lot of negatives you can say about Cal, but one thing you can't say, there are a lot of coaches in college basketball that they bring players in, they let players leave, and it's a transactional deal. You come here, you get, you stay for a year, 2, 4, whatever, and then you're out, and then we never really talk again. That's not who Cal is. That's not who Cal has ever been, okay? Let me give you a quick side tangent before I kind of give you some more details, okay? So for some of you, many of you don't know, but I actually wrote a book about Kentucky basketball in 2016, 2015. And it was about the 2009-2010 Kentucky team. I called it One in Fun, about John Wall, DeMarcus Cousins, etc. And I still, I still remember vividly. I went to campus. Dwayne Peavy was the administrator at that point. Eric Lindsay was the SID. And I remember them, I went for a book tour, and they took me to Coach Cal's office, and he looks at the book and he says, "I love this. What can I do to help?" And he shared on his Twitter page, on his Facebook page. He shared a link to my freaking book, okay? And I was, much younger at the time, maybe less established in my career. He didn't know me from anybody. But it's like, if he could do that for me, imagine if you're a dude that played for him for 2, 3, 4 years. I mean, the stories go on and on. I remember a story from the book, actually. There was a student manager at the time. His name's Chad Sanders. Now, he's pretty high up in the Toronto Raptors organization now, and I don't want to speak for him, but he was a student manager for Cal at Kentucky in his first year. And he talked about, for 3, 4, 5 years out of college, I was kind of grinding as, I forget if it was a scout or whatever. And Cal would call once a month. How you doing? You doing okay? What can I do to help? Who do I need to call? All that good stuff. And it's like, Cal doesn't have to help him. That's it. By the way, Cal doesn't have to help me. That's not a knock on this individual person. But it's like, Cal doesn't have to help me. He doesn't have to help his former student managers. We're not DeMarcus Cousins. We're not John Wall. We're not De'Aaron Fox. But it shows you the loyalty of his guys to him. By the way, I thought he had an incredible quote after the game about the whole, the loyalty of the three guys on the team to him. Producer Matt, play the clip from the press conference.
Yes.
You told us when we talked on Thursday that you were gonna have a conversation with Adu, DJ, and Big Z about going back. Can you share what that was, and just how proud you were of their efforts tonight? They all played big roles.
Well, I called them in together, and I said, "Are you guys okay going back here? You're going to be okay?" And they all said, "We're fine, Coach. We're worried about you." That's the kind of team I have.
I mean, what else is there to say? Is it a little bit of Cal hyperbole? Maybe. But his guys were like, "Coach, are you okay? What can we do for you?" And that is the loyalty that he establishes in his guys. And that's why I could never count out a John Calipari team, because they are going to play hard for him. It might not always be pretty. It might take some time. But look, again, I go back to why I believed in this team in the offseason. They finished second in the SEC last year. By the way, it wasn't just the three guys on this team. It wasn't just Torres' experience 8, 9 years ago. Did you see the tweets that started popping out during that game? Producer Matt, do we have Davion Mintz, former Kentucky Wildcat? He said, "Great win, coach." This is a former Kentucky Wildcat now tweeting about that. "Great win, coach." Ty Washington tweeted, quote, "Walked into the trap and took over the trap." The trap, listen, I'm not hip on all the kids slang these days. The trap, I'm pretty sure, is Rupp Arena. And he's talking about Coach Cal walked in and took that freaking place over, okay? And by the way, if I messed up the kid terminology, I apologize. I'm old and boring. Finally, I thought this one blew up the internet, but I thought this was symbolic of guys' respect for Coach Cal. Producer Matt, can you show what Reed Sheppard was wearing walking into the Houston? Oh my goodness, Reed Sheppard. He's wearing Kentucky shorts, but an Arkansas t-shirt. Now listen, I'll go on a little bit of a side tangent here. I will defend Kentucky Wildcats. Didn't totally love the look. Kind of felt like, is that a scenario where, listen, you can wear a shirt with Coach Cal's face on it. You could wear a shirt that says, always supporting Coach Cal. I don't know that you should wear the opponent's actual colors and logo on your shirt, but that shows the loyalty that these guys have to Coach Cal. And if you think about it, it makes sense, right? Just think about it. Reed Sheppard, listen, you can say what you want. I know he's a Kentucky kid. I know his dad played at Kentucky. But Reed Sheppard grew up going to John Calipari camp every summer. Grew up of waiting for that scholarship offer from John Calipari to go to Kentucky. And so, listen, it just shows that his guys are always going to be loyal to him. And again, it's why you can never count him out. Now, I will say, big picture, there has to be, I think, a little bit of a frustration from Arkansas fans, not because you're not enjoying the win, but solely because of the fact that it's like, damn, man, if we could go in and do that against Kentucky, why can we not do it against everybody? And you know what my immediate thought was as I was doing Fox Sports Radio, we reacted to this game before we talked a lot about Luka, is my reaction was, man, I wonder how badly Arkansas fans, and we're going to make that mistake a lot today, how bad Arkansas fans want those LSU and Oklahoma games back. For people who aren't diehard Arkansas fans, just did it again. For people who aren't diehard Arkansas fans, you lose to LSU 78-74. It was a game where you actually largely had control for about 30 minutes of the game. And then you lose by 1 at home, or lose by 3 at home last Saturday to Oklahoma. And yes, the win is great for Arkansas. They're 13-8 overall. But I'll tell you what, you win those 2 games. You're 15-6, and not only are you in the NCAA tournament, you're very comfortably in the NCAA tournament. And so I promise that, I'm not going to overreact. I'm not going to sit here and say, there's 10 games left in the regular season. Kentucky or Arkansas is going 10-0 over the next 10. That's not what I'm going to say. But what I will say, if you can play like that, you're capable of beating anybody. And now it's on John Calipari to consistently get that effort and performance from start to finish out of his guys. You're not going undefeated. Auburn's really good. Alabama's really good, but you can't beat Texas on Tuesday, Wednesday, whenever you play them. If you play with that effort, you can't beat LSU in a rematch at Bud Walton Arena in a few weeks. If you play with that effort, you can't beat Missouri in a rematch. And I think Missouri's an incredible team. You still got Vandy, South. Those are winnable games if you can play like that. So it's on John Calipari. But the last thing I would say, I thought John Rothstein brought up a good point on Twitter on Saturday night. He just basically said, look, if you look at Arkansas's resume right now, 13-8 ain't great, but you have a neutral court win over Michigan. You have a road win at Kentucky. They're much more in the tournament picture than I think a lot of people realize. They got to win games. They got to win games that matter. But they're not out of this by any stretch. They basically I think they're 1-7 in quad 1, 1-1 in quad 2. They have no bad losses. And I just don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that they can make a run. But they've got to do it. They've got to handle this whole situation. And man, oh man, it's all in front of them. They can be a tournament team. There's no reason that they don't have the opportunity to be a tournament team. But now it's on them to actually make it happen. Tell you what a fun way to start. Unless you're a Kentucky fan, let's go ahead and what we're gonna do. We're gonna take a quick break. We're gonna come back. When we come back, we're gonna talk about it from the Kentucky side of things. First time in a while that I think there's heat's not the right word for Mark Pope, but I think there's some real frustration. I mean, this is a guy that said the day he took the job, he understood the assignment. Well, guess what? After a couple days. After a couple months of basically being able to do no wrong, if he thought he knew the assignment, well, I'll tell you what, he got a D or an F on the assignment on Saturday night. What's next for Kentucky? Because I think it does raise some concerns. There's also injuries. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to take a quick break, come back. We'll get to some of your questions. We will prioritize the super chats. Quick break. Be right back. All right, we're going to get back to the show in a minute. But before we do, many of you ask me all the time, Torres, what can I do to help support the show? You give me hours and hours and hours of content every single week. What can I do to help you? Well, I'll tell you what, do me a quick favor. Check out the Aaron Torres Media merchandise store for all of your team-specific shirts, hats, and more, all available at aarontorresonline.com/merchandise. A lot of you wondering, Torres, what can I get in that merch store? Well, first of all, we got our brand new Hope and Pope Kentucky basketball t-shirts. That's right. Mark Pope has arrived. He is here to save the day. Get your Hope and Pope t-shirts there. Also, Arkansas fans, the Big Pig Invasion is here. You can get your tees there. Basketball School Alabama shirts. More Hurley 2024 UConn shirts for your tailgates at Rentschler Field, your games at the XL Center or Gamble. And oh, by the way, your Mike effing Woodson gear for Indiana. If you love football, we got you covered too. We got more Dion shirts and hats than we even know what to do with. The freeze warning has hit the plains. Auburn fans, grab your freeze warning tees now. And of course, our new era, new rules shirt applies to Nebraska football and its incredible fan base. We have more coming for the fall, plenty in stock right now. So make sure to check out the Aaron Torres Media merch store at aarontorresonline.com/merchandise. And you can always hit me up with any questions. Aaron Torres Podcast. All right, everybody. I'm back. Good to be back. So tell you what, producer Matt, get a few questions going or comments or whatever. We will get to some of them in a minute. By the way, shout out to our guy, Nobody, who is back in the chat like he never left, baby. We appreciate your support. Yeah, man, we got a lot to talk about. So we just talked about, so listen, let's reset here. We just talked about Saturday night, Rupp Arena, 89-79 final score. Arkansas gets the win. For people who are just watching this on a clip later on, we did talk about the Arkansas perspective. Incredible win for John Calipari. But at the same time, you know what I was thinking about when I was watching this game? I'll give credit where it's due. I was thinking about something that John Neighbors said on this show last week when we had him on as a guest. He said, Torres, I'm not saying we're going to win. And to be clear, I don't think John predicted Arkansas to win. But he goes, there's no pressure on Cal. His fan base doesn't think he's going to win. The Kentucky fans don't think he's going to win. The media doesn't think he's going to win. And he said there's no players on Kentucky. There's no pressure on Kentucky's players as well. I mean, they weren't there last year, whatever. But there is a lot of pressure on Mark Pope. You know, we clipped off the segment with John Neighbors, and the headline was, all the pressure is on Mark Pope. I think people didn't really understand why that would be. Well, I'll tell you what, after the loss to Arkansas on Saturday, it feels like that was the first time that questions aren't the right word about Mark Pope, but beyond frustration, visceral public frustration. By the way, I will never criticize any fan for being vocal. I always say, just don't post home addresses. Don't make threats to your coach. But if you want to express being mad, that's part of being a fan. And it felt like that was the first time in a long time, maybe of the Pope era, that people were genuinely frustrated. You go back to the Alabama game. Alabama's great. You go back to, the Vandy game. Kentucky's banged up. Well, last night was frustrating. I thought it was encapsulated by a tweet from Matt Jones, Kentucky Sports Radio. Producer Matt, if we have that, you can go ahead and pop it up. Matt Jones, KY Sports Radio, tweeted, quote, "It's embarrassing to lose a game to a 1-6 SEC team at home. It just is. Throw in the Calipari factor, and it's a pretty terrible loss. A lot of really good Pope wins this year, but this definitely is a massive clunker." So listen, I know some people love Matt. Some people hate Matt. Matt's another person that's always been good to me. But he is the voice of a lot of people in that state, and it felt like this was the first time that it's like, man, we had hope in Pope, but we are frustrated. So let's go ahead and dive in, because I do think, to be fair, there are reasons to be frustrated. I think there are also reasons that we have to be realistic about why we got the result that we did on Saturday evening. So first off, first of all, let me say this, and this isn't even necessarily a blame. First of all, I'll get to that in a minute. We do have to be fair to Mark Pope, though, okay? We do have to be fair. We do have to say that, if we're going to say, Arkansas did it with only 8 scholarship players, essentially, we have to acknowledge that Kentucky is really, really, really banged up right now, okay? And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Lamont Butler, your starting point guard, is out right now. Now, Pope had some interesting comments after the game that seemed to indicate that he might not be close to coming back. I don't get the sense that it's that bad. Yes, I know I've said publicly on this show that I've known the family for a long time. I don't have any personal insight into Lamont's injury status. Everybody's being kind of quiet right now about what, just how healthy he is, when he'll be back. I don't think it's season ending or whatever, but he wasn't available on Saturday. Kirk Risa, the backup point guard, wasn't available on Saturday. Andrew Carr played probably the most he's played in about 3 or 4 weeks, but he's clearly not 100%. And so we have to acknowledge it. By the way, again, I'm not going to sit here and lie and say that I thought that Kentucky was going to lose this game. But what I will say, and we talked about it on the show on Friday, is like, I thought Tennessee, it was a calculated mistake. They kind of let Kentucky just walk the ball up, get into their offense before they started playing defense. I said, Cal's got this smaller lineup. He's been pressuring more. Can you force some turnovers? Can you make Kentucky uncomfortable? Can you get them out of their rhythm? And I think to a degree they did that. Listen, I'm not going to sit here and lie and say that it was like, a brilliant defensive effort. I mean, Kentucky did still put up 79 points in this game, but I thought there was a pathway, and I do think we have to acknowledge there were injuries. I also think we have to acknowledge, as great of a moment as it was for Coach Cal, it was relatively fluky. I'm just going to say it. We got Arkansas fans in the chat. If you want to get mad at me, I totally get it. But at the same time, it's like, Arkansas was a 31% or so three-point shooting team coming into this game. They hit 13 of 25 on Saturday night. guys that haven't been hitting them all year or guys that haven't been consistent all year. You basically got, and again, I think it's part of the hype of the game, you basically got the best version of essentially everybody on that Arkansas roster, except maybe Jonas Adu, who's still clearly not healthy. But that was the best game Janelle Davis played all year. Carter Knox was phenomenal. Adu, the three former Kentucky guys were phenomenal. So these are all factors. My buddy Colin Cowherd says this all the time. There's a difference between excuses and reasons, okay? My dog ate my homework is an excuse. I think there are legitimate reasons why Kentucky lost this game. Out-of-body experience for Arkansas. You're banged up. I'll also add this too, and I don't know if I said this on this show or, I did so many interviews last week, but I did wonder, the mental makeup of Kentucky players versus Arkansas players coming in. I remember previewing the Tennessee-Kentucky game earlier in the week, and I said, look, I don't think Kentucky players are going to be looking ahead to Arkansas because to them, it's just another game on the schedule. Now, Mark Pope knows how big of a deal it is. The fans know how big of a deal it is. But it's, if you're Jackson Robinson and you were playing at BYU last year, I know he played at Arkansas early in his career, but is it a bigger game for them than Tennessee was or than Gonzaga was or than Duke was? Same with whoever, Otega Oweh, on and on and on and on and on. So again, I'm not making excuses for Mark Pope. I'm trying to explain reasons. But I'd counter that by saying the effort wasn't good enough. And there is frustration with the fan base. I totally get it. And I think a lot of it is completely justified. In terms of why, first of all, I just don't think, the effort, not only defensively, but I just thought the effort to start the game was okay. But Arkansas was better. I mean, Arkansas was flying all over the court. Arkansas, a team that isn't very big, basically it was essentially the exact same rebounding situation. I know Kentucky isn't the biggest team either, but, Arkansas struggled on the boards. It was basically even rebounding. The effort wasn't great to start, okay? I think beyond that, two things. One, the defense just has to be better. And listen, you guys know, I'm not X's and O's guy. I'm not going to sit here and say, in ball screen coverage, they have to do, dude, stop. I think there's too many nerds on social media that think they have all the answers. It's like, no, I do trust the basketball people to figure out the basketball stuff. And I'm not going to sit here and say that I have all the answers as to what's going on defense. But I'll say this, there was a lot of people in the chat earlier in the show that were like, we should not be practicing offense the rest of the year. The defense has to get better. And I do think this is just a concerning trend for this team that at this point, it's beyond a trend. I mean, just look at the stats from the season. If you want to argue that Arkansas had an out-of-body experience that they might not have the rest of the year, they scored 87 points and they've scored fewer than 70 in basically every other SEC game except for one, okay? But even if you want to argue that Arkansas had an out-of-body experience, well, you gave up 89 to Gonzaga in overtime. You gave up to open SEC play 100 at home to Florida. You gave up 90 to Mississippi State. You gave up 102 to Alabama. You gave up 74 to Vanderbilt. And so all these situations are different. And listen, you're facing some of the great offenses in all of college basketball, Alabama, Florida, whatever. But Florida ain't the 2016 Golden State Warriors either. They scored 44 points at Tennessee on Saturday. And so the defense has been not great, inconsistent. And I'll say this, it's not really that you really don't have the players. I remember Mark Pope kind of bragging in the preseason, like, Lamont Butler and Otega Oweh and Amari Williams are all fighting at practice over who's going to end up winning SEC Defensive Player of the Year. So if you have an elite on the ball guard who I understand wasn't available, if you have an elite big defensively, if you have Otega Oweh who should be special on the wing, you have to perform better. Again, I thought the rebounding was fine, but could have been better. But I'll also say this. I do just think there have been too many times throughout the season where the effort just simply was not good enough over the course of a game where you simply showed up either not ready to play or the other team showed up with more juice than you. That's just the fact. It's the bottom line. You can argue me, you can fight it, but it's the truth. I mean, again, and I think it really, to me, is, again, the reasons versus excuses thing. We've made excuses maybe for past lack of effort. Oh, against Ohio State, you lose that game. Well, it's right before Christmas and, you're up there for a few days and whatever. Didn't show up ready to play. I wouldn't say the Clemson loss was one that they weren't ready to play. But, listen, the Georgia loss, I don't think they showed up to Georgia ready to play. Listen, Georgia's fine, but I said at the time, because people were like, oh, they're going to be ranked next week. I'm like, Georgia's not good. Stop. Georgia's not an elite SEC team. Mike White is not an elite SEC coach. Like, listen, you start ranking SEC coaches, Mike White's in the bottom 2, bottom 3 right now. So the effort was not great against Georgia. The effort was not great against Ohio State. And I'll take it a step further. Like, even the Vandy loss a few days ago, you don't want to oversell it because clearly Lamont Butler was hurt. But the counter to that was that, you were getting blown out in the first half before you made a run to start the second half. And so, listen, I don't want to dismiss the highs, because the one thing I will say about Pope, he is great in big games and big moments, having his team ready to go. Phenomenal against Tennessee. Phenomenal. There's no other way to put it. Mississippi State, you gave up 90, but you were ready to play. Alabama, you lost, but you were ready to play. Florida, you won, but you were ready to play. But there are just these games where his team does not show up ready to go. Georgia, Ohio State. I think Arkansas, even though you scored 79 points, I don't think you were ready to play. And so Kentucky fans, and I'll be curious, maybe we get to a comment or two here, Matt. I'll just say I do understand the frustration. This was a situation where, again, and here's the other thing. Let me even backtrack to something I said a minute ago, okay? If your argument is that, which I just made, is that the players maybe don't fully understand how big of a game this is, well, guess what? You got to make them know, and you got to make them learn. You got to make them say, hey, listen, we understand that you just played Tennessee, and this league is so tough, and it's so good, and that's such a great win. But we have to move on to the next one, because the people in this state, the people that are going to be in the building, this game matters to them. You know those like cliches, which I always thought were kind of stupid, of like, I'd rather beat my rival and win every other game than win a national championship and lose to my rival. That's kind of a stupid thing to always say, right? Like Ohio State kind of proved this year, like, yeah, it kind of sucks to lose to Michigan, but we'll take that natty. Well, we're not giving that trophy back. But I do think this was one that we just had to win. And if the players don't fully understand that, you have to explain it to them so they do understand it, because the emotion was high, the interest was high. Listen, we could argue about the college game day stuff, but it was clear that they made a colossal mistake, because the atmosphere for this game was unlike any maybe we've seen in college basketball, not only this season, but pretty much over the last 7, 8, 9 years. So listen, this isn't the whole like cope with Pope, he's no good. No, you got 5 wins over ranked teams. You've beaten Duke, which is a great win. You've beaten Tennessee on the road, but you have some really bad losses as well. And I think lastly, I think sometimes we overrate things in the moment, but that is a loss that could have long-term consequences, for NCAA tournament seeding perspective. I mean, Kentucky was one of the few teams that has had coming in a bunch of quad 1 wins and no quad 2, 3 losses. That's a quad 2 loss. And listen, now you know what's crazy? You kind of got to root for Arkansas, because you got to hope that win gets better as time goes on, not worse. So listen, I'm not ready to throw in the towel on Pope. I'm not ready to do the cope with Pope. I still think he's great. I still have hope in Pope, as the t-shirt says, but I do understand any Kentucky fan that is frustrated today. Producer Matt, before we move on to some of the other games from Saturday, any intriguing comments or questions? And we can always get to more throughout the show. Razor Swag said, listen, why did Kentucky lose? Didn't eat their Collie Puffs. I will say there's a couple NFL teams that have some Collie Puffs in the facility right now. I don't know if Arkansas basketball is a place that has taken on the Collie Puff train yet, but if not, they should. And we're going to pretend like they absolutely did, because we got a superhuman effort from Arkansas fans, from Arkansas's team. I think Carter Knox, I think Adu Theoro, I think DJ Wagner may all be eating Collie Puffs. I think that may be the secret to their success. Nobody, always appreciate your support, Nobody. He says, quote, Butler is our best defender and our backup point guard is out. Have to have our center run offense and couldn't run pace. Listen, that's why it's hard for me to be critical. That's why it's hard for me to be critical of Mark Pope too much. Listen, I don't think they were ready to play. I don't think they were fully focused. But name me a team that can lose their starting point guard, who also doubles as one of the best on-ball defenders in college basketball, and you don't have your backup. Like, I agree with Nobody. I understand frustration, but and I know it's a big game. I know it's a game that you can't lose. I referenced it earlier in the week, but I listened to a couple Kentucky pods like a week ago after the Vandy game, where it's like, okay, we got 2 wins. We got 2 games coming up. Tennessee's win would be huge, but would you rather have the Tennessee win at Tennessee or the win over Arkansas? And everybody said, you just can't lose Arkansas. I'll tell you this too. I watched a lot of the great on-the-ground coverage from Lexington. I was supposed to be there. I'm so sad that I didn't get there. But watching everybody, I did not get the perspective that anybody on either side actually thought Kentucky could lose this game. I watched some of the sources say stuff. I love Jack, what he does. He's incredible. Obviously, Sean, who works with him, is incredible. I know Zach Gagan a little bit, who's incredible. I love all those guys. But you watch some of their live streams, I don't think the possibility ever crossed their minds like, man, we could actually lose this game. And again, we had John Neighbors on last week, and I don't think John Neighbors thought that Arkansas could actually win this game. So, again, I'm not ready to bail on Pope. Didn't think it was his best night, but I think to nobody's point, you're down your starting point guard, your backup point guard, and that matters. Oh, S-Jack, baby. Listen, I'll tell you this. Torres had a big internal debate. So we know Arkansas has not played very well throughout parts of this year. And I was like, do I tweet the Big Pig Invasion meme? And I was like, screw it. We're tweeting the Big Pig Invasion meme because the Big Pig Invasion, at least for one night, is back. So can anybody stop the Big Pig Invasion? There was a Big Pig Invasion in Rupp. There was a Big Pig Invasion in Rupp on Saturday night. Those hogs, can't get rid of them, man. I still listen. We're 24 hours later almost. I still cannot believe Arkansas won that game. Still can't believe Luka got traded either. But again, we'll save that for another podcast. I can't believe Arkansas won that game. All right, I'll tell you what. Producer Matt, flag the comments. If you are a Kentucky or Arkansas fan, go ahead and stay in here. And listen, we can continue the conversation here, but we got to get to some other stuff from college basketball because I did think there were a couple other things that were worth discussing. By the way, we're 41 minutes in, still haven't got to any other games, and that's okay because it was that kind of Saturday. Let's go ahead and switch gears, though. Let's talk a little Duke, Carolina. First of all, listen, I don't want to keep making it about Arkansas, Kentucky, but what a whiff by ESPN. Okay, listen, I know this is a Duke UNC segment, but I said last week, I was like, how can you go to Duke-UNC? And I understand that probably from a ratings perspective, Duke-UNC is going to do better. But, College Game Day essentially is about capturing the stories of college sports. And it's like there's no bigger story than a Hall of Fame coach returning to the place he coached for the first time. And I'll say this, you knew the atmosphere at Rupp Arena was going to be better and crazier. And I just think they completely whiffed sending College Game Day to Durham. And it's because of the fact of what we saw. I'll say this, and we'll get into it. I thought there was a scenario, unlikely, but I didn't think Arkansas was going to beat Kentucky, okay? But you could see the scenario. Calipari's got the guys hyped. Athletically, they're a little bit even better. Kentucky's banged up down there. There was no scenario where North Carolina was beating Duke. At Cameron, Duke is statistically the tallest team in college basketball. North Carolina is one of the smallest teams. There was never a moment where I thought that there was any possibility that Duke was not going to beat North Carolina. And unfortunately, if you're a college basketball fan, you saw it with your own two eyes. Final score 87-70. It was ugly. It was bad. We have to credit Duke, which is running away with the ACC. We also once again have to talk about North Carolina, which is 13-10 overall right now. So listen, Duke fans will tell you that I never say anything nice about Duke, and Torres is always criticizing us, and this and that. Let me say this. You guys are not only awesome, but that was a great performance in what, again, will probably be one of the highest ranked highest rated college basketball games for people that had nothing to do on a Saturday afternoon. There's no football. There's no college football. There's no NFL. They probably tuned in, and they did get a show from Cooper Flagg. Okay, Cooper Flagg was unbelievable in this game. 21 points, 8 rebounds, 7 assists, 3 steals, and 2 blocks, okay? And listen, and I said this in the preseason about Cooper Flagg, this is what makes him different. I think there's a lot of these one-and-done guys that are going to be the number one pick in the draft that come in, and they only can impact games if they get you 30 on any given night. And we don't have to go through the history of one-and-dones, but you kind of know who those guys are. Like Kevin Durant at Texas, like he was just a bucket getter. Michael Beasley, who was great at Kansas State, a bucket getter. John Wall at Kentucky, a bucket getter. What did I tell you about Cooper Flagg from the beginning? I said, this is a guy that Yeah, he can get you 30 on any given night, and he got 42 against Miami a few weeks ago. But he's also a guy that really impacts the game in so many different ways. And he's a guy that one night he might get you 40, the next night he might get you 8 points, but have 14 assists. That's just the way he plays. And so they come out. He was unbelievable to start the game. Under 15 timeouts. So the first 5 minutes of the game, I think he had 6 points, 4 assists, 2 steals, something crazy like that. The crazy stat was that I think he either scored or assisted on Duke's first 15 points. And by that time, the game was basically done. I thought America got to see what the skill set is. Listen, there's a different conversation between National Player of the Year and the guy who is going to go number one. Cooper Flagg's going number one. He's the best basketball player in college basketball, okay? So he was phenomenal. I thought early in the game, if you remember, there was a play where he was in like the right-hand corner on your screen. He catches it. North Carolina immediately double teams. He turns without even looking, throws a pass across court, hits Tyrese Proctor right in the hands for a wide open three-pointer. That's who he is. That's what he's about. Obviously, beyond him, Con Knippel, 22 points in that game. Duke with 15 straight wins. I mean, again, I still think asking them to go 20-0 in league play is probably a little bit out of reality. But they are 11-0 right now with 9 games left in the regular season. They do still have at Clemson. They do still have Wake Forest at home, and they have at Carolina. So I still think there's going to be a loss or two somewhere. But listen, they basically locked up the number 1 seed in the East. Everybody else is playing for seeding at this point. They're going to have a path, Raleigh to Newark to the Final Four. We'll see if they can get it. But this thing's done. They're incredible. They deserve all the praise. Same time, though, we also have to talk about North Carolina because I tweeted this out and I truly mean it. I thought Saturday was a statement game for Duke, national stage, etc. I thought Saturday was a statement game for North Carolina in the other direction. And that statement is, yeah, we're just not good enough. And not only are we not good enough, we're not even in the same class as our biggest rival and, frankly, most of the rest of the elite teams in college basketball, okay? And so, listen, we've done the North Carolina, Hubert Davis, his future, this, that. We don't need to relitigate it here. I mean, I think there are a few things that can be true in that conversation, and we've talked about it already, is that I do think that North Carolina wants to keep him. I don't think they're in a rush to do a coaching search. I do think that, listen, the positive is he did just win the ACC regular season last year. He's made the NCAA tournament 2 of 4 years. He made the Final Four in year 1. But I think the counter to that is what is also true, is that basically for 3 of the 4 seasons, they were not good from start to finish. The year they made the Final Four, remember, that was a team that did not start out well, and it wasn't until February where they figured things out and made a run. And so if you're a North Carolina fan, listen, North Carolina, I always say, I'm not going to tell any fan base how to feel, not even, I'm a UConn alum. I'm not telling UConn fans how to feel. Like, stop, And so I only bring it up to very simply say is I'm not going to tell North Carolina fans that if you think Hubert Davis is the answer, you have no idea what you're talking about. And I'm not going to say, like, if you want Hubert Davis, to be brought back, like, it's your prerogative. Everyone should feel how they want. But what I do think is that North Carolina, they are a blue blood. They are a program that for pretty much the last 80 years has basically been awesome. Okay. And the one time they weren't awesome was under Matt Doherty, and they immediately moved off him. And I know it was a little bit of a different scenario. I know that, I think my understanding was he's a little tough to deal with behind the scenes. We actually had him on the pod at one point. He was actually very nice and gracious, but I only bring it up to say the one time that this happened, you moved off of him quickly. And so you look at Hubert Davis, this is who you are right now. Again, we've already talked about it. We don't need to reiterate it. But year 1, you really struggled. Year 2, until you made a run late. Year 2, you missed the NCAA tournament as the number 1 seed. Year 3, you were great, but it's worth noting your 2 best players, RJ Davis and Armando Bacot, were recruited by the previous staff, were basically established stars when you got them. And then year 4, it's a total disaster. You're 13-10 right now. And I think what's both, a little bit of a not saving point for North Carolina, but at least you can say you're 13-10, having played literally the best teams in college basketball. They played Auburn. They played Alabama. They played Florida. I mean, we're talking about, I know Florida just lost on Saturday, but we are talking about, let's see here. They played Duke, Alabama, Florida, Michigan State, I think they played as well. Did they play Michigan State? They did. So they played Michigan State, who also lost on Saturday. They played who else? Who's the other one I'm missing? I don't know. The point is, of the 10 teams in the top 10, they've already played 5 of the teams in the current top 10. Okay, so you can't say they haven't played anybody. But again, the issue is that in those games, they're not even close. They got destroyed by the Auburn Tigers in Maui. They got destroyed by Alabama at home with a rising star of a head coach in Nate Oates, who took over, by the way, a year before Hubert Davis? I mean, he's been to a Final Four. He's won the SEC twice. He's got a top 5 team that's good enough to win the national championship again this year. You got destroyed by Duke. And so, again, North Carolina can do what they want. I said it last week. I still think, Hubert Davis has a little bit of wiggle room. I don't think the administration wants to make a coaching change. You just fired Mac Brown. You probably paid him a little bit of buyout money. You're paying Bill Belichick a crap ton of money. You're putting money into NIL resources. I don't think they want to go through a coaching search. By the way, you do have Caleb Wilson, the 5-star committed. But I think the counter to that is are we going to keep going like this? Are we going to keep going where we really have not a lot of highs and a lot of lows? Are we going to keep going to a world where you can say what you want, but Duke is running away with the ACC right now? By the way, they did make the Elite Eight last year. They were very good last year. And, they listen, how about this? North Carolina won the ACC last year, and Duke went further than them in the tournament. But beyond that, I just think you're looking at who you're losing to. It's one thing if you're North Carolina too, and Duke's just potentially a great, great, great team. But think about the teams that they're losing to. Think about this streak that they're currently on. Lose at home to Stanford. Lose on the road to Wake Forest. Beat Boston College in overtime. Lose to Pitt, now lose to Duke. So that's 4 or 5 losses. Of those losses, Pitt's kind of a tournament-ish type team, but they're not great. I think they're probably on the wrong side of the bubble after Saturday when they lost to Wake Forest. Wake Forest is a fringe bubble team, whatever. One thing if you lose to Duke, but to me, this felt like rock bottom. And I do think that there are going to have to be some tough questions with Hubert Davis. Again, the gift and the curse of it is that the games left on your schedule are winnable. The problem is that they're not going to do much for you in the computer metrics. So again, you're sitting here at 13-10, 23 games into the season, 8 games left in the regular season. That means that even if you go 8-0, even if you go 8-0, you're 21-10. But again, how many of those wins really move the needle? I mean, if you went 8-0, you'd be fine. But the point I'm trying to make is this felt like rock bottom. I just don't think this is a very good team. And listen, the other thing too, and I know I'm rambling, so I'll cut this off really quick, is that the other thing too is that athletically, you weren't even in the same stratosphere as Duke. I mean, Duke has guards that are 6'5", 6'6". Your guards are 6'1", 5'11", 6 foot, whatever. And again, that's why I just didn't think that UNC even had a chance. Elliot Cadeau is tiny. Seth Trimble is undersized. Ian Jackson has nice size, but it's just it was just a bad matchup from the beginning. And I think this has to be rock bottom for North Carolina. And I do believe behind the scenes, questions are being asked. And I think it's almost like Ryan Day is like an extreme example. But remember Ryan Day, they lose to Michigan. And the conversation we had on this show was Ohio State administrators have to be praying that they go on a run because I don't think they want to fire him. I think it's the same with Hubert Davis. But man, oh man, it is not pretty. By the way, our producer, Matt, who's now doubling as a researcher, says, fun fact, Auburn is 2-0 versus UNC all time, and Alabama has won the last 3 in that series. So to all the Alabama and Auburn fans, that's kind of a great metaphor. Listen, I think Auburn's actually a historically potentially great team. So there's that. But you get destroyed by Auburn. You've lost to Alabama now 3 times in the last couple of years, including in the NCAA tournament when you were favored last year. It's one thing for Duke to, have kind of surpassed you. It's one thing for, a down year, whatever. It's another thing when Alabama kind of has your number, when Auburn the last couple of years has had your number. So it ain't pretty. We'll see if it gets better. UNC, at least, as I said, a little bit of an advantageous schedule. They do have Pitt at home, and then at Clemson next week. That's going to be a quad 1 opportunity. You want to make the NCAA tournament, you got to take advantage. Producer Matt, I'm running on fumes here. Let's take a quick break. When we come back, I do want to talk UConn beating Marquette. Bobby Hurley's freak out because there's a lot to discuss there. Quick break. Come back. We'll talk UConn, Marquette. Be right back. All right, we're going to get back to the show in a minute. But before we do, many of you ask me all the time, Torres, what can I do to help support the show? You give me hours and hours and hours of content every single week. What can I do to help you? Well, I'll tell you what. Do me a quick favor. Check out the Aaron Torres Media merchandise store for all of your team-specific shirts, hats, and more. All available at aarontorresonline.com/merchandise. A lot of you wondering, Torres, what can I get in that merch store? Well, first of all, we got our brand new Hope and Pope Kentucky basketball t-shirts. That's right. Mark Pope has arrived. He is here to save the day. Get your Hope and Pope t-shirts there. Also, Arkansas fans, the Big Pig Invasion is here. You can get your tees there. Basketball School Alabama shirts. Mora Hurley 2024 UConn shirts for your tailgates at Rentschler Field, your games at the XL Center or Gamble. And oh, by the way, your Mike effing Woodson gear for Indiana. If you love football, we got you covered too. We got more Dion shirts and hats than we even know what to do with. The freeze warning has hit the plains. Auburn fans, grab your freeze warning tees now. And of course, our new era, new rules shirt applies to Nebraska football and its incredible fan base. We have more coming for the fall, plenty in stock right now. So make sure to check out the Aaron Torres Media merch store at aarontorresonline.com/merchandise. And you can always hit me up with any questions. Aaron Torres Podcast. All right, everybody. I'm back. Good to be back. Good to be back. This will be the final segment of the show. So good to be back. And I so very much appreciate everybody tuning in on a Sunday. We had a monster crowd. We still got a lot to react to. This might be, again, a 2.5 hour show. Drop your questions, drop your comments in the chat. We will get to them. Again, we will prioritize super chats as they come in. So we appreciate your support of the Aaron Torres pod. Let's keep it going, because there was another marquee game on Saturday in college basketball. I don't think it got lost in the Duke-Carolina shuffle. I don't think it got lost in the Arkansas and Kentucky shuffle. But I'll say this, UConn, as we've discussed, they've been struggling of late. They had beaten DePaul earlier in the week in a game that they really did not play well for about 30 minutes before they pulled away late. Lost at Xavier last week, survived Butler in overtime, lost to Creighton. They've been without Liam McNeely, their McDonald's All-American lottery pick, since January 1st. There was hope that he was going to come back in this game. There was also concern about our buddy Hassan Diarra, bad ankle. You could even see in the DePaul game. I mean, he's one of the great defensive guards that we have in college basketball. He was getting beat by DePaul's guards. Well, I bring it up because I don't think a lot of people thought UConn was going into Marquette and getting the dub. We find out minutes before the game that Liam McNeely will not be available. Hassan Diarra will, but you could tell within just a couple minutes that Hassan was less than 100%. But guess what? It did not matter, as UConn goes to Marquette. Came into this game ranked number 9 in the country on the road, and nobody's giving UConn a chance. By the way, everybody on College Game Day picked Marquette to win this game. UConn's official Twitter page made sure everybody knew how wrong they were. Dan Hurley then shared it with some commentary of his own. But I bring it up because the Huskies win 77-69. We may have all, and I don't even include myself because I thought all this was overblown, but I'll tell you what, one, it felt like there were a lot of people that were enjoying the fall of UConn. Well, guess what? UConn not only is not dead yet, but I think this could be the start of a reemergence as, I don't want to oversell, listen, whatever. I don't want to oversell anything. I think they're really good. I think when they're healthy, they can play with just about anybody. And I think we maybe saw the first step of that on Saturday night. So there's a million different things we can talk about, a million different reasons. To me, what this game was really about, and this is so cliche, but it was really about just the heart of a champion. Like, UConn comes in. There haven't been many times the last 2 years, especially the last probably 18 months or so since UConn got off to a hot start last year, that Dan Hurley can really play like the underdog. Nobody believes in us. But there weren't. Listen, I picked this game on Friday's show. I did not pick UConn to win. And so it was the first time in a long time that Dan Hurley could be like, yeah, nobody thinks we can actually win this game. And you could see from the beginning that this one was different. Now, UConn has gotten off the hot starts against other teams and then struggled in the second half. Butler comes to mind. There's a few others. I think Creighton a few weeks ago comes to mind as well. This was a game. They got out to a hot start. They stayed hot in the game. Little run for Marquette before the half, but it did not change the fact, or a little more to start second half, whatever. But it did not change the fact that this was just vintage UConn. This wasn't about being pretty. This wasn't about being sexy. This was about grinding a win and playing great defense, crashing the boards. One thing about UConn, since Dan Hurley got there, they are going to play harder than you every time they take the court. And I think that's something that's been a little bit missing this year. Certainly was not missing on Saturday, okay? So they out-rebound Marquette by 10 boards. On top of that, I think this is kind of a important note as well, is that the offense was great. Defensively, they were phenomenal. Finished the game holding Marquette to under 40% shooting, 7 of 22 from beyond the three-point arc for Marquette. So it was about defense. It was about rebounding. It was about culture. No, who else it was about? It was about the man. You can see producer Matt has the note in there. Solo ball. Okay, so for people who don't follow UConn on kind of a day-to-day basis, this is one thing that Dan Hurley does maybe better than anybody in college basketball right now. He's one of the few coaches that he can identify the guy that's not the 5-star can't-miss kid, bring him into his program, and in year 2, year 3 becomes a star. We've talked about it a million times. Jordan Hawkins, who was a lottery pick 2 years ago, star player on the national championship team, the first one in 23. That was not a kid that was a McDonald's All-American, but you could tell right away the skills were there. By year 2, he turns into a lottery pick. Donovan Clingan, people think I'm making it up. Look it up. Was not a top 30, 40 recruit in his class, okay? Well, Solo Ball is the latest example of it. Solo Ball was a good recruit. He was not a great one. Last year showed flashes. He was great actually in a win over North Carolina at Madison Square Garden, but he has turned into a bona fide star for this team. With Liam McNeely out, he has stepped up. He has been the best player in this game. 25 points, 7 3-pointers made. And then as our Torres on UConn account pointed out, how about this? Last 5 games without Liam McNeely when they've needed somebody to step up. Almost 19 points per game, 6 rebounds per game, 51% shooting from 3, 36 of 71. This guy, listen, if I don't even know if there's like a national most improved player, but he's certainly the most improved player in the Big East. I would argue he's probably the most improved player that I've seen nationally. Gone from a guy that, again, last year averaged 3.3 points per game in 11 minutes played to now 15 points per game, 46% shooting from 3, and again, 19 points per game the last 5 games or so. Beyond that, listen, Alex Karaban was much better. He had been struggling. We talked about the loss against Villanova when he missed those free throws. He hadn't been playing great. He really struggled against DePaul the other night, but he looked good. Jalen Stewart, 3 really big threes in probably the first 7 or 8 minutes of the game to establish the tone. Samson Johnson played well. But here's the crazy part, and here's what I keep going back to with this UConn team, which I think is kind of interesting and I think is kind of important to me. What I think is interesting and what I think is important is, again, they're doing this without their best player, Liam McNeely, okay? And Liam McNeely kind of gives them what they need, is another go-to scorer, another difference maker. And listen, UConn does not play again until Friday against St. John's. That is going to be a crazy game. By the way, we have a Torres on SJU page, the kid who helps me run that, Drew, who also runs our Bama page. That's another conversation for another day, but Drew does great work. Why do I bring it up? He's like, dude, Torres, you have to get back to Stores for that game. I could not make it. Now, in hindsight, I wish I had. But I just bring it up because UConn now has a week off. Dan Hurley basically acknowledged after the game that Liam McNeely will play in the next game. And what I think we're seeing is that the best version of UConn is still yet to come, okay? Because I think about this with UConn. You know what I go back to, honestly? I go back to last year with UConn. If you remember, and if you're not a UConn fan, you might not, but Donovan Clingan, remember him, dominated the NCAA tournament, all this. Well, he gets hurt late December. I'm blanking. UConn fans, you can criticize me for not knowing enough about the team. I'm just getting old. I forget if it was an ankle or a foot or whatever, but he was out for about a month. And then he came back, and you could see he was really good, but he wasn't great. And UConn really used February to ramp him up. And by the time the NCAA tournament came, he was by far the most dominant player in college basketball, completely controlled the paint, was great in the Big East tournament, the NCAA tournament. We all remember what he did to Illinois in that game, where he played one of the great college basketball games I've ever seen against Illinois, defensively, offensively, etc. And then, of course, he goes on to have great success in the Final Four as UConn wins a national championship, okay? And so I just bring it up because this kind of reminds me of last year, is that UConn was really good all along, but the best version of UConn was when they used February to ramp up Donovan Clingan for March. And so I do wonder, is it at all possible that we get the same thing that happens with UConn last year? I'm not saying they're going to go on and run the table and win the national championship, but if this team can go to Marquette, they can pretty much beat anybody left on the schedule. Now, St. John's is really freaking good, okay? But at the same time, you could beat anybody left on the schedule, especially with Liam McNeely back. So as a UConn guy, I am excited. I never bought the narrative that they were lost or that they quit on Dan Hurley or whatever. By the way, I don't even know if we talked about it, but UConn fans actually booed UConn during the first half of the DePaul game last week. I actually didn't really have a problem with it because it was just, to me, fans holding the program to a higher standard. But I never believed that the program was falling apart or whatever. I just believed they were without a lottery pick. Well, they get this win over Marquette. They're getting their lottery pick back. Solo Ball is turning into all Big East first team for sure. I don't want to go crazy and say like all American, but he's the most improved player I've seen in college basketball this year. If there's a national most improved player, he deserves it. But credit to UConn for getting this win. Not a lot of people had it, and they get the victory. All right. I was going to do like a ton more on the rest of these games, but I'll tell you what, the show has gone on for so long. We're at like an hour 10 here, and we haven't gotten to a lot of other stuff, so we'll be very quick. I think the first thing that's really worth noting, by the way, producer Matt, feel free to tag any other questions, comments, if we think there is anything interesting to talk about. But let's just quickly rip through the rest of these games. The first one, did you see what happened in Tempe, Arizona? Okay, Tempe, Arizona, wild place. Arizona State, by the way, fun campus. All Torres will say about Arizona State. Had a buddy that went to grad school there, may have hung out at ASU for maybe like 6 weeks at one point. Kind of, I was graduated, he was in grad school. Maybe I hadn't totally figured out life. So I've always had a soft spot for Tempe, but I'll tell you what, I don't know if Arizona fans do. Arizona gets the win 81-72 in this game, but that's not really the story. First of all, we'll talk about Arizona and like what it means big picture for them. But to me, the story of this game was the final probably 7 or 8 minutes of the game, okay? And so first off, first half, Bobby Hurley, we're talking about Bobby Hurley now, not Dan Hurley. Bobby Hurley gets a technical early in the game, rips off his tie, goes crazy, is super frustrated, but then late in the game, as the game is going, it's not quite out of hand, but it pretty much is. There's this crazy scenario late in the game where Caleb Love gets hit for a technical foul. Now, we can't show the video here on YouTube because, it's a copyright infringement. It's a CBS broadcast. But Caleb Love gets a technical. Everybody on the Arizona bench starts freaking out like, whoa, what are we doing here? And so they go to the replay. They show an Arizona State player had headbutted Caleb Love. He had headbutted him. Again, I'd love to show you the video. I wish we could, but we cannot by rule show it here on YouTube. Not having this whole video taken down because a lot of you have watched it, okay? But at the same time, why it matters, why it was important is because the kid gets ejected. Bobby Hurley goes crazy. Then, as the game is going final, Bobby Hurley, this is one of the weirdest things I've ever seen. He sends all his players who aren't on the court and his assistant coaches to the locker room, basically insinuating that there's going to be a fight on the court. Now, I'll say this. I have seen scenarios where a team is on the road and about to lose a big game, and they know a court storming is coming. So, like, I remember Roy Williams was kind of the first one to really do this, is if he was on the road, and just pick a school. I'm not even going to pick a school because I don't want to be negative. But, if he was at, I'll pick a school, forget it. Florida State, Clemson, Pitt, whatever, and he knew there was going to be a court storming, he would actually send all of his players who weren't on the court to the locker room because he said, I don't want any of my players getting caught up in that, okay? I've never seen a coach at a home school do that, and then sends all of his players out. Then the game goes final. This is one of the great moments that I've ever seen because Bobby Hurley basically refuses to shake hands with Tommy Lloyd, looks over at him, kind of gives him a two-fisted wave, and says, I'm not coming over there. And Tommy Lloyd's like, Tommy Lloyd, if you don't know Tommy Lloyd, nicest human being ever. Like, salt of the earth, doesn't have a mean bone in his body. I don't even think he knows how to raise his voice. And he's like, what? Me? You're mad at me? You're mad? Your guy's the one that headbutted my guy. Like, what are you mad at me for? And so kind of pushes him aside, whatever. And then, so it's crazy. So we have the headbutt. Bobby Hurley sends his team to the locker room, refuses to shake hands with Tommy Lloyd. Then Tommy Lloyd, to his credit, kind of got the Arizona crowd fired up. But I bring it up because this was kind of interesting. After the game, Bobby Hurley was still mad. And he was basically asked about Caleb Love. Here is a quick clip of part of what he said about Caleb Love.
I do get a vote for all.
So that was how Bobby Hurley's sound, or how his press conference ended. I have a vote for all Big 12, and you could guess who's not getting my vote? Caleb Love, because your guy headbutted Caleb Love. Feels a little bit aggressive. Listen, I don't want to do this whole thing. We've talked a lot about Dan Hurley. I know the whole family runs hot. I don't have a problem with Dan Hurley because, listen, I think Dan Hurley can berate the refs. I could be wrong, and if I am wrong, you can call me out on it. I don't know that he's ever berated other teams' players. I don't know that he's ever berated other head coaches. And Bobby Hurley to come out and say, I would never vote for Caleb Love, or I'm paraphrasing, but I'm not going to vote for Caleb Love for all conference. It's kind of classless to me. Totally classless to me, as a matter of fact. So it's disappointing. And I know I said I wasn't going to go long on this segment, but I had to set that up. Bobby Hurley refusing to basically acknowledge Arizona or Caleb Love. But we're going to acknowledge Arizona here. And I'll say this. This is one of the great turnarounds we've seen. Okay. And I think we talked about it a little bit on Wednesday's show after Arizona hit that buzzer beater to tie Iowa State, force overtime and beat them. Arizona is quietly turning into one of the best turnarounds in college basketball that we have seen in a long time. Okay. Because you look at Arizona, and I keep throwing this out, but they lost to UCLA in mid-December and were 4-5 at that point in the season. I said the season's over. It's done. Forget about it. Not even worth acknowledging, blah, 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 whatever. Well, I bring it up because since then, since starting 4-5, Arizona is now 15-6, which means they're 11-1. They're 9-1 in the Big 12, which is insanity. Because this was a team that at times struggled in the SEC or in the Pac-12 last year. Well, they're 9-1 in the Pac-12 with Houston's loss to Texas Tech. They are tied atop the Big 12. This is one of the great turnarounds we've ever seen. Now, I will say Arizona's schedule does get much tougher. I think this game at BYU this coming Tuesday is no joke. BYU has won 4 in a row coming into this one. You got Texas Tech, which is the only one that beat you. And then the back half of the schedule, you still have Houston, at Baylor, at Kansas, at Iowa State. So that is a tough road, but you got to give Arizona credit. They've won 10 of their last 11. The big difference, Caleb Love is playing much better. There was a time in the season where he was averaging 8-9 points per game, 27 points in this game for Caleb Love, a game where, oh, by the way, on top of that, he also hit 5 of 9 from 3. This after starting very slow against Iowa State, but hitting 3 clutch 3-pointers late in the game, including the buzzer beater to force overtime. Caleb Love playing better. Listen, Arizona fans know I think that Carter Bryant, the star freshman, should be playing more. But yeah, what a day for Arizona, man. What a day for Arizona. Bobby Hurley with the freak out of the century. Cannot believe it. Tell you what, let me see here. Is there anything else that I want to talk about? The Tennessee dominated Florida. If we hadn't gone so long everywhere else, I probably would not have, would probably talk a little bit more about that game. I don't know that there's like some amazing takeaway there. Houston lost. I don't think that's the end of the world. I think we hit on all the big stuff. Producer Matt, before we go, any questions from the crowd, any questions from the audience, anything interesting? It can go back to Kentucky, Arkansas. It can go basically wherever. It doesn't really matter to me. But let's any other interesting questions? All right, we got a super chat. Appreciate your support from Stut Joe. He says, Arizona Wildcats tied for first in the Big 12. Any thoughts? Well, you just got him, Stut Joe. Thank you for the support of the show. We appreciate it. I think it's one of the great turnarounds that we've seen. I think that, to me, I don't know what else there is to say. I mean, I did just say it. I know you obviously got in that question before I started the conversation, but this is so impressive to me because one thing I will say really quick, I was concerned about Arizona and Tommy Lloyd going into the Big 12. And the argument I've made is they have, under Tommy Lloyd, historically been great in the out of conference, and then they struggled in the Pac-12. And I said, if you're losing at Oregon State, if you're losing at Washington State, like, what are you going to do when you got to play Kansas and Baylor and whoever? Well, so far, they've passed all the tests so far. It will get tougher. Like I said, they still have at Baylor, at Kansas, at Iowa State. I don't think BYU is going to be an easy game, but credit to Arizona. They will be ranked in the top 25 coming into this week. And I think they're, I can't say they're more dangerous than Houston, more dangerous than Iowa State, which actually took a second straight loss. But I think they're in the conversation. That's a team that I didn't think was going to make the tournament. I think they could be a second weekend team. I think they could be a Final Four team if things break right. So we will see. But yes, Stut Joe, thank you for your support. Thank you for the super chat. And there's nothing else to say other than that is an awesome, awesome, awesome win for Arizona. And it's really been an awesome about 5 or 6 weeks since that UCLA loss. Producer Matt, any other questions before we get out of here? Logan Bolt says, I think he speaks for a lot of Arkansas fans. He said that Arkansas might not make the tournament, but this win will make this season perfect. Listen, I think there's something to it. Listen, it's different. I will say it's different because obviously, it's not to end the regular season, but like, how does a Michigan fan, like if Michigan goes 7-5, but they beat, whoever, Illinois instead of Ohio State to end the regular season, that's a much different 7-5 than beating Ohio State to end the regular season, then going to your bowl game and beating Alabama. And so the wins matter. And listen, such a big win for Arkansas, such a big win for Coach Cal. It was just, I think to me, it was just one where you couldn't lose it if you were Mark Pope. You couldn't lose. Like if you pick one game on the schedule, you just cannot lose. That was the game. Arkansas gets the win. Arkansas fans enjoy this one. I hope that there is a way that they can extend this. I hope that there is a way that they can go on a little run because you saw the best version of Arkansas. I am just curious on, if we can keep this going beyond this, beyond just this game. It starts with at Texas. That's a winnable game. Got to go ahead and win it. Biker says Kentucky, if they don't get Butler back, has no shot to make it past the first weekend of the NCAA tournament. Listen, I know there's a lot of consternation in Big Blue Nation right now about Lamont Butler's status. Mark Pope said something to the effect of like, we don't really know what's going on or something like that. But I don't get the sense that it's a season-ending injury. I don't get the sense that you're playing against Vandy. You're clearly not yourself, and now you're not good enough to play at all. I just don't buy it. I wouldn't worry just yet. If you're Kentucky, listen, I know there's no silver lining to any of this, but you got a great resume. You're making the tournament, and it's the cliche. It's kind of the Calipari cliche is you just have to get right and be ready for March. I think Pope knows that. I think he's not going to rush him back. All right. Hubert Davis will bring Caleb Wilson to Indiana. Not totally sure what that means. Does that mean Hubert Davis is taking the Indiana job? I don't know. By the way, Indiana lost to Purdue on Friday night. And it's bad at Indiana. They had a chance to win that game too. Mike Woodson, the clock is ticking. We'll see if it is for Hubert Davis as well. Chat's starting to get a little weird, not going to lie. I see some Diana Ross and the Supremes, some commentary about Russia. Let's see. Okay. I think it's time to go. Nobody says, Torres, time to wrap it up. I think it is time to wrap it up. An hour and 19 minutes of content on basically 4 hours of sleep. I think it is time for Torres to get out of here. If you're not subscribed to the Aaron Torres pod, do me a favor, make sure to do so. Apple, Spotify, Amazon Music, Google Music, wherever you get podcasts, please make sure to subscribe. Make sure to rate and review the show. Go ahead and subscribe, rate, review the show. Again, YouTube people, we're at almost 50,000 subscribers. We're not going to get there without your support. We are at over 49.5 right now. We're less than 500 subscribers to 50,000. So I do appreciate your support there. Make sure you're following on social media at Aaron_Torres on Twitter, at Aaron Torres Pod on Instagram, Aaron Torres Podcast Questions at gmail.com. I do think I'm going to get out of here. Appreciate everybody's support. Wild show. And yeah, time to go. Shout out to Torrin Craig. Shout out to Rachel, who hates my voice. Shout out to JJ Reddick, you F-head. JJ, have fun coaching Luka. We'll be back Tuesday. Aaron Torres Podcast.